Hello, my name is Bella Copeland and I'm the Director of Programs at HOST, Salford's Home of Skills and Technology operated by Infor. HOST is an innovation hub that is on a mission to break the barriers to entry into the tech sector, enabling businesses of all sizes to scale up, driving economic growth by creating an inclusive community at the heart of Media City. I'm very excited to be here hosting today's panel alongside some of Salford's digital leaders, discussing the achievements made to date across Salford, the plans for the future, and the role of leadership in a dynamic and digital landscape. Today on our panel, we are lucky to be joined by Steve Fry, Assistant Director of Digital and Customer Services at Salford City Council, by Debbie Brown, Strategic Director of Service Reform at Salford City Council, and Mo Issap, Founder and CEO of Infor Group, operators of HOST. In terms of today's order of events, we're going to be starting with a brief overview of this week's Digital Leaders Week by Debbie before we pose some questions for our panelists, focusing on a discussion of all things leadership, digital, and transformation. And for those watching live, you're able to actually submit your questions, and I can take a look at those as we go through today's session, so feel free to take part of today's conversation. Without any further delay, though, we're first going to hand it over to Debbie to get an overview of this week's activities and the overall Digital Leaders Week here in Salford.
Thank you, Bella. Yeah, hi, hello everybody. So yeah, welcome to hearing what we're doing here in Salford. I think just to say really about the digital leader family, really, because there's no doubt it is the UK's leading organisation that brings together a whole host of sectors across the UK, whether that's public, private, startups, medium-sized organisations, to share good practice around digital transformation. They do that through a combination of events, whether that's through face-to-face, whether it's workshops, panel discussions, Q&As. And I would also say that the Digital Leaders Network is very dear to our hearts here in Salford. In 2018, we were delighted when we were named Digital Council of the Year, but we were also absolutely delighted to be the overall digital leaders that year in 2018, and it's something we're very proud of to this day. So delighted to keep that association with Robin and the whole network alive in Salford. So this week we've made sure that every single day there is a series of events going on across the city that covers not only the strategy, if you like, so why we did what we did and how we went about doing it, but actually the very real impact that it's having on people's lives every day throughout the city. So a really exciting combination of events in Salford this week.
Thanks, Debbie, and I think we're all excited to be part of those this week. So, sticking with yourself then, could you provide us with a bit of an overview of the digital transformation that Salford City Council and Salford as a place that has actually gone through in the recent past?
Yeah, sure. So, the digital transformation journey for the City Council started probably back in 2015, where it was very much about making sure that as a public service we were keeping pace with what our customers were used to in the private sector. So for those people who wanted to do their council business at 10 p.m. at night, that we were enabling them to do that. And that was very much so. Those who were able to interact with us digitally could do, so that our face-to-face services could still be freed up, and we had that resource and capacity for those who were unable to or who didn't want to for whatever reason. So that was very much the ethos, and our strapline taking that forward was quicker, easier, better. Anything that we did in the digital world had to make things quicker, easier and better for our residents.
Amazing. Yeah, I think everybody can get behind that strapline for sure. So Steve, to pass it over to yourself then, thinking about that transformation, what were some of those lessons learnt that as a leader taking an organisation through digital change and just change in general that perhaps you gleaned from that experience?
That's a great question, Belle. I suppose from my personal perspective, it's hard, really difficult, and it's not an overnight thing either. We have a great ethos in the city and in the City Council about transactional change versus systemic change, and to do digital transformation properly, It's a systemic change, and that means changing the culture of people, of an organisation, bringing staff along with you. For example, we created something which I think is quite unique in Salford, which is working with our HR and OD colleagues around this squad mentality. We pinched it from Spotify. Essentially, it's about having the right people in the right room with the right skill sets and empowering people. If you don't do that, then I think you've lost that movement straight away. And you do need to change, systemically change at all levels. And I'm lucky to have the lady who's just spoken as my boss, who puts a lot of faith in me and my thought leadership. And I think without that chief exec level buy-in, then I think you would struggle. So I think the keys for me are have that support, have the right people around you, and empower the people to do what they need to do. They will make the change for you.
Yeah, it's that do with people rather than to people. And I've had the pleasure of actually speaking to some of Steve's team members who have echoed that. And, you know, that's amazing, actually. So not only for you guys to say we went through that transformation and everyone was bought in, but across the staff group, that, you know, that's just to your point, that's not easily done. So super well done on that. So I'll pass over then to Mo for our next question. So Mo, can you elaborate on what is the role of Infor and Host in further accelerating that digital transformation across Salford moving into the future?
Thanks, Bella. The role of Infor as an organization is about working in communities and places to bring more accessibility to technology and technology benefits, and that inclusivity to what transformation is all about. For far too long, transformation in its own self has been too stratified, and Infor Group is on this mission to ensure that the benefits of technological transformation, digital transformation, the productivity gains that are achieved by organizations, local authorities, the public sector, the public realm, civil society are reaching all of the parts of community. And what we do and how we do that is we concentrate on skills, innovation, and startups. And we bring the three together symbiotically because one serves the other, and create an environment where the three can coexist. Skills are fundamental to organizations, to whether they're public sector or private sector. Innovation is at the heart of digital transformation, and we as UK PLC are now in a post-Brexit world needing to lead the world in innovation. And you know, the Greater Manchester region is at the helm of pushing in that direction. And then, you know, creating an environment for new entrepreneurs of a diverse background to come and develop their IP, their technology in a safe and secure environment. And that's what we're doing at Host Salford with great partners, Salford City Council. And again, touching on what, you know, Debbie and Stephen have said, is that this is a team game. And all of the parts of the ecosystem must function effectively to ensure the benefits and the tangible benefits are realized. And that's what we are about. We are about action, delivery on the ground, making sure that those benefits are realized. And if they do get realized, then the momentum will ensure that, you know, the furthest reaches of our communities will access them.
Amazing. And I think that ecosystem piece is so important because that, you know, if we look at experiences of the past or other transformations, that skills one is the one that picks up the local ecosystem. It doesn't mean that we're just bringing businesses here. We're accelerating IP. We're doing it with local people. And I think that's the part of the ecosystem circle that, you know, it makes us really proud in some ways, isn't it? So sorry, I'm putting words in your mouth, Mo, but it's from my perspective what we're quite proud of. So Debbie, I'll pass on to you then. Looking to the future, what's next for the local digital transformation of Salford? What are you really excited about, thinking about what's on the horizon?
So I think it's very much what we've got the opportunity to do here in Salford is to drive forward much more as a system and a partnership. So we've got some fantastic assets now. So there's the work that the City Council did. We have a foundation trust that is a digital exemplar in the UK. We have a a university that's renowned for robotics and AI. And of course, the whole jewel in the crown, Media City UK, is right on our doorstep. So it's very much about convening and coalescing all of those to say, so what's the sum of all of those parts? And host absolutely is I call it the engine room in all of that. So that's the engine that's going to drive all of that forward. What is it that our offer is to UK PLC? As part of the whole levelling up agenda, you know, where are our projects that we can make a huge contribution to the economy. So it's pulling together that innovation. We have what we call the innovation triangle in Salford, and it's really making sure now that we've got an exciting 6 months ahead where we're very much bringing that narrative together now, bringing together that story to say this is now what Salford can offer. But this is what we would like in return. So yeah, a very exciting next phase for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we think of that triangle, and I suppose all of the opportunities, the permutations are infinite. You know, there's just so much that could come out of that if you even put two elements of that triangle, I guess, together, like health with Media City. What does that mean? Or...
But yeah, it's spot on actually, Bella. And I think the other thing is that we're already kind of being inundated with those organisations who've got those startup ideas, who've got that kind of, here's something innovative. Can we come and try it in Salford? They know that you know, we're all receptive to that. And particularly then, making sure that we're combining that with skills and jobs and opportunities for people in Salford, but clearly the broader GM and North West infrastructure.
Amazing. That sounds great. So lots, yeah, like you said, lots to be excited about. So Steve, turning the conversation less about, I suppose, digital and what's happened in the past and more around leadership in specific, how do you think that leadership or leaders can measure how effective they are, you know, keeping themselves accountable to continuously learning, continuously changing in this evolving digital world that things, you know, things change minute to minute. So how do leaders make sure that they're with it?
Really good question, Belen. Let's unpick it, I suppose, is where we're at. So the whole ethos of this week around digital leaders, I was reflecting on this last night when I was thinking about the panel, and I think the pandemic has seismically shifted everyone into digital leaders of some sort. So if you think overnight, your managers, your team leaders, etc., who was working in office environments, who was working with people, and it shifted straight away. So I think there's a cultural shift that's happened across the whole of the globe. And you've had to, you know, the success of that is how do you keep a team motivated remotely, how do you put the right tools in place, how do you shift your organisation, your skills. I think from a leadership level perspective, I suppose I always reflect on myself as a reflective person in terms of how we pivoted the team in terms of its skill set, its workforce development, the future of the careers of people within that team, how we're making sure that we've got a sustainable department and organisation that's fit for the future. And I think that goes back to what both Debbie and Mo have spoken about, which is that pipeline, which is that ecosystem within the city and the city region to make sure that you give opportunities and you create an ecosystem to make sure that it's sustainable. And ultimately, I suppose, and we have this discussion, Mo and I, constantly around customer experience and making sure that the performance is the best for people within the city. And that's how we measure ourselves, and that would be my recommendation to people.
Yeah, so keeping up with those expectations, right. That's quite a useful way of thinking about it, because if the people that we're serving and we're working with are, you know, our peers, and they're going through that transformation, how do we make sure that we're meeting those expectations?
Yeah, and I think technology happens, you know, technology never slows down, and we've seen that, it just evolves. Yeah. It's taking people on that journey. At all ages, and making sure that, you know, we inspire young people, make sure that we give opportunities to young people to shape the way that we think, and it's not listen to understand, and making sure that we sat around the table with the right people.
Yeah. And it's probably more, it's tiring in some ways. I even think about new apps that have come out in the last year, and you start to check yourself and go, I'm not going to download that one. I know that everyone's using it, but I'm done transforming. It actually, you have to challenge yourself, don't you, and say, well, if the newest generation, or the newest communications is through platform, exactly. Well, that's the one I'm thinking that I'm resisting. But if that's what it is, then how do we stay ahead of that? So it's, always something to keep us busy, I suppose. So Mo, on that same theme around leadership, what do you think that leaderships can do to change and challenge the status quo, specifically in response to adopting new and emerging technologies, but more widely as well?
I think leadership is is sometimes overused. I do believe that leadership is something that is subjective within your context and where you are. But I think if we go to the sort of the term leadership, and particularly leadership within the context of civil society, whether it's in policy shaping, whether it's in industry, organizational leadership, I do think there's three attributes that now need to be seen in leaders, and myself included. I think we need to be very consistent on these three things. One, there's a need to be courageous. I think there are brave decisions to be made, ones that maybe aren't the easy decisions to be made. The flux and the whole sort of exposure to the fragile nature of society as we see it today requires courageous leadership. It also requires patient leadership. Far too often we've been in a rush and a perpetual search for new things, and we try something and then it doesn't work, and then we move on to something else, whether that's policy, whether that's digital, and we can't afford to do that, because we have to be consistent and we have to be patient on that. And thirdly, I think it's so important for leaders now to take everyone on that journey with them and be absolutely inclusive. And in being that, we have to change our vocabulary, change the way we approach the conversation, look into ourselves as well as to how much of a barrier sometimes leaders are themselves to people reaching out and wanting to be part of the journey. Being passive is no longer an option, and we need to mobilize and activate every part of our community, every part of our society to feel empowered to be adopting leadership, whether it's young people, whether it's people from a disadvantage, whether it's women, and all parts of our society need to feel empowered to be wanting to lead, because the talent's there. We, of those people who have the privilege to have assumed those positions, must now reach out and ensure that we don't become a barrier to those people reaching out. Because when we get leaders of that type, change definitely happens. We will see positive impact. At this moment in time, it's still true that if we look into our boards, if we look into our organizations, they still do not reflect the communities and the society that we serve. And that's an indictment to us, and we must be absolutely cognizant of that and wanting to change that status quo and be deliberate in making that happen. We can't be superficial, we can't give it lip service, and this is what I mean by, if we're not able to be part of the solution, then we must step aside and let somebody else be part of that.
Mm-hmm. So it's I suppose if we look at the past, perhaps it was sometimes done too much of kind of empire building, I suppose is what I'm thinking, keeping it all in. But actually, the more that we can make that inclusive, we can empower communities that we may not have been able to reach in the past, or find ways for them to be able to engage. That's how we challenge that.
Well, that's where courage comes from.
Yeah.
And courageous and brave leadership is not one that you take on to, there are plaudits to be had as a leader, and you get the wins, and then everybody pats you on the back. And sometimes you take tough decisions, which take longer to realize the benefits, but those are the ones that will leave the lasting legacy, and maybe beyond your own time. So sincerity in that endeavor must be the mantra, that it's not about us as individuals, it's about that collective effort to ensure that the long-term gain is achieved, and that takes courage. Sometimes it's not easy to be in that way, whether it's in politics or it's in industry. Everybody's pushing for those results straight away. You conform to a situation, but I think that's where that courage comes, and being different or setting your stall out to be consistent on an approach it requires courage.
Yeah, that consistency and courage. I think I like the way of framing it in that way. So, Debbie, similar type of question, thinking about leadership. How can leaders effectively manage digital change for their employees, or equally for local citizens, and bring them along that journey?
Yeah, so I think there's something else about taking on that courage point, about leaders kind of also being very prepared to say things as it is. So what are the challenges here, and what help do we need with that? So, I've been very positive about Salford. Salford's a fantastic city with all of those great assets, but we also have real challenges. We have some of the most deprived wards in the UK in Salford, and we know that part of the barriers to inclusion are three key things really. So it's skills, access to kit, and connectivity. So it's absolutely, I think, the role of leaders to bang that drum very loud, to government, to say we need to be prepared to invest in those who will need that extra support, so that no one is left behind as part of this. If we're not careful, we could have a whole section of our community who are excluded because they don't have access to things like kit, connectivity, and skills. So I think we need to make sure that point is being made, but also be prepared to be part of the solution, so that we will work in partnership. If there are projects where we can look at how do we make high street broadband free, for instance, for our residents. So let's be brave on those areas. What is it that's actually going to make the difference? And I think what Salford are very good at is that co-production. So talking to people, what are the barriers? What is it that you're worried about? And sometimes it might be, the digital inclusion teams will tell you, some people are like, I'm worried I might break the internet if I go on there. So there's a skills issue there. Yeah. Some of it is actually, no, I can't afford to do this with the data package that I've got. So we really need to understand and talk to people about what the barriers are and how can we address them. And I think that's a critical role for leaders, because we have to be authentic, and we have to understand what those issues are, and I suppose then set the vision for, so this is what we're going to do about it. This is how in the next 3 years we will have a way that says in 3 years' time we will have X thousand more of our people who are able to connect digitally with us.
Yeah. It's that leaving no one behind, and every single person counts.
Absolutely.
I think sometimes, to stick with yourself, the challenge has been we've looked at strategies or we've looked at approaches, and they've perhaps focused on getting as much as we, meeting as much as we possibly can, and reaching as many people as we can. But sometimes what we lose in that is the individual, and just as you've said, the specific root causes for that person, why they can't engage. Yeah. And so when we come to top down, I suppose we miss out on that bottom up. So it's, as I think what you're saying is engaging with those people and understanding what are their specific root causes.
Yeah, I mean, it was the heart of our digital inclusion strategy, was that it had to happen in communities, and it had to be based in places that people trust, and with people that those communities trust. So, it's no point someone from the council going along saying, here's an iPad, it's easy. Actually, it was more about engaging people with, well, what are you interested in? And actually, here's a digital way of doing that. So coming at it absolutely from the heart of those communities.
Yeah, and even that point on finding who those local leaders or organisations are that people trust. And again, that's that inclusivity point and partnership point, that it doesn't need to be the council always driving that. And absolutely, actually, it shouldn't, because sometimes those that people feel more comfortable with or able to engage with are different groups, and that's where that collective piece becomes so important.
Yeah, and then digital as an enabler. So it isn't just you have to do digital because everybody's doing it. Yeah. It's, well, what are the issues in Salford that are challenging us, and where will digital assist that? And again, and as leaders, what do we need to do to connect with that? So, we have some amazing you know, kit recycling schemes now in the city that you know, I have to say businesses have absolutely embraced. It was almost like they were just waiting for somewhere to take their kit to. So yeah.
Excellent. Oh, that's great. Well, Steve, along that same line of working with the community then, how do you think that leaders can give back to their communities, and how can they connect with those communities, particularly coming from the public sector? Because as Debbie said, sometimes there can be a bit of a barrier there.
Quite, yeah. I think the 2 points, Bella, from my perspective. I think, you know, we're gifted in Salford with an array of multinationals. So it's how we work with them closely, how we create that inclusive economy. And we just launched that strategy a couple of months or so back. So how we create that whole business sector across the city and make sure we've got the social value in there, make sure we've got that corporate social responsibility within there, so that they give back to the community that they're actually working within. I think from a personal perspective, I suppose it's harnessing the Salford lad in me, really. And I think anyone that knows me knows and can tell that from the city. So I suppose it's that passion, that drive, and it starts at a young age. And nobody told me or gave me that expectation. I could be sat there now with the likes of Debbie, Mo, and yourself around the table, or you could be a CDO, you could be in that industry. And there's multiple jobs across the digital sector, and I think that's our job as leaders to say, actually, this isn't a vertical domain. This isn't about coding. This isn't about immersive technology. This is about giving people out there the actual knowledge that we all have around. Actually, it's project management. It's PR. It's X, Y, and Z, and we're giving that playground to play with. And you know, that's what Host and yourselves and Mo have brought to the table. I think that's unique. And I've not seen that across many places in the UK, where we're creating an ecosystem all the way from education, all the way up to SME level, up to multinationals, where we're working as a system to give opportunities to people within the city. And again, that's a systemic change, that's a cultural change. It will take time, but the building blocks, the engine rooms are in place, the anchor institutes are in place. It's about coalescing that now, making sure that we listen to the people and provide what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that ecosystem piece, because as you said, if we just built the verticals, we're actually missing out on the ability to create other opportunities. Because someone might be interested in pivoting what they do. They currently work in, say, marketing, and they've always wanted to get into digital marketing or digital PR. And how do we make sure that there's that opportunity? It's not just, oh, you have to become a coder. No, that's not what we're saying. It's actually, how do you become a part of this digital future and play your role? And, you know, even for ourselves, we probably would all say we work in that digital space, but we're not coders, or, you know, so we can still play that role in creating the environment for people to be a part of it. Absolutely. So Mo, onto yourself, and actually playing a little bit off of what Steve was just saying. How do you see digital transformation being able to create positive outcomes for local citizens that go beyond, as we just said, creating more coders? What are those outcomes that we're really trying to create that take time, but they'll, you know, will deliver that wider benefit for our place?
Yeah, I think we start from the fundamental of, and again we use language, and language is so important in this particular space. When we talk about ecosystem, in terms of technology, we've really got to sort of demystify all of these things, because we assume that people understand what we're talking about. When we're advertising certain jobs, we assume that people know what a cyber analyst is, and whatever else, and you know, that doesn't land in the places that, you know, where people do not, you know, necessarily understand what that actually involves. So I think that the place where I always say we start from is the fundamental truth that everybody wants more. There is nobody in society that is actually seeking to not have more, wherever you are. The problem is that people see the more in the prism of what society has given them. So if it is brand new trainers for their children, that's what they see as more. Yeah. Because that's what more is defined as. And I think the bit that we need to concentrate on is to educate and inspire across all of the parts of our communities to sort of give a vision and a view of what more could look like. Line of sight is fundamental to everything. Digital is no good if people can't see how that will then permeate into their own life circumstances, and how that can benefit in improving their situation. So a lot of times people take the view that people don't want this, or they're not interested, or we've tried and it didn't happen. And I think that is where we have to be absolutely focused, that is not the case. We didn't get the language right. We didn't try hard enough. We didn't go far enough. We gave up halfway through and said, oh, let's try a new policy because that one didn't work. Well, if you'd have gone a bit further, it's that person drilling for oil, and he's drilled 50 holes at 5 meters, but essentially the oil was at 10 meters. What are those holes about? All you've done is craters. And a lot of times in our communities, all we've ended up doing is create craters that people actually fall into and can't get out of. And we've got to stop doing that. We've got to be consistent. We have to be deliberate. We have to understand the complexities of community and how those manifest themselves and the challenges that individuals have in life, and work through them. Because absolutely everybody wants more. Everybody, if they can see something for their children, for themselves, they will do whatever it takes to get there. And we've seen the results of that. When people have been given that life chance opportunity, the line of sight, then that they've gone and done it, and the talent exists there. So I think, for us, that's where the truth is, and we must be absolute in that, and then work with that community and the things that we're doing with Salford City Council, taking our Skill City campus into the community, to the different parts of the community, and working deliberately to inspire and educate, give line of sight, and then you build the bridge to prosperity. You can't build the bridge until that person sees, because they're not going to travel on that bridge. Once they see the destination and see what it looks like for themselves, then they will travel across that bridge. And then we have to build those bridges and safely take those people. Once they're there, they will be the leaders of that community, because they'll be role models coming back and saying, you know what, now this is something we can do. And we've seen that in many communities, and Salford has already seen results come through like that, but we have to do so much more, because fundamentally, Bella, we exist in society where there are social borders, absolute social borders. They are so high and people can't see them, but they are absolute. And so within a half-a-mile radius of an economic powerhouse, there'll be absolute poverty. And the two communities will be as polar opposites, or as distanced as you can ever be, because one community does not see the relevance of the other. And we must change that status quo, and that is the responsibility of us leaders. We've got to work into, even our workplaces. I always say that, pre-pandemic way, look at what's happened with the virtual working scenario. I bet you in our workplaces predominantly, we coexist with people who are from the same socio-economic background. They went to the same sort of education. We then send our children to the same schools as they send them to. So even our workplaces become stratified. And how many times do we interact with people from a different part of our society, or in a different, and that used to be the case many decades back, when people would be able to connect with different people from different socio-economic, and that would inspire. If you go to a school where there is upwardly mobile and people from there's an inspiration from the two. And our workplaces just became, our apps are governed to meet that sort of people that we are connected. So if you're a professional, you've got an app for the professionals, and you've got, we're defined. And digital has a flip side to that it could actually take us to a more stratification, because it's allowing you to profile whom you should be connected to. Yeah. Not the fact that we should be looking at the real power and culture is of having a most diverse and different friends group. And look, we can all look at our friends groups and say, what does that look like? Do people come from different backgrounds? We choose to send our kids to a certain school. We choose to work. And when the pandemic hit, those who could work effectively from home, and not a problem. Yeah. Not a problem. Yeah. But those who couldn't, then you could see the stark reality of those social borders in our workplaces. never mind beyond that. So,
Yeah.
so we have a great challenge in that, and in that we have to start with that fundamental truth that we know that that reality and the truth exists, and we must go and actually answer that question.
No, so it's, thank you for that, Mo. You know, kind of culminating in that, it's that, and I like that actually. Sometimes we strive for outcomes that feel like really narrow, you know, or super specific. But what we're saying actually is we want a place where we've raised aspirations, we've provided the opportunities, and we've given those people the ability to see that through, you know, and see that whole cycle then happen as a result of it, rather than kind of reinforce potentially some of those barriers that already exist. It's breaking those down is what we're aiming to achieve. Absolutely. So I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit away from leadership, but more towards the future, what we're excited about. So Debbie, for yourself, how do we make sure that as a place, Salford continues on this trajectory and we keep moving forward and take advantage of those opportunities to transform, to attract new and exciting things, and to be you know, the digital transformation place?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of, you know, just reinforcing some of what we said earlier really is understanding what will make a difference to people's lives. And that's what's got to drive this. Sometimes, and I say this in work sometimes, you know, just because we can doesn't mean we should. So, you know, there's a tendency, isn't there, that, oh, here's the latest thing, you know, we must do it, we must have it. Well, let's just come back from that and understand, you know, what difference is this going to make? Do we need to do it through a technology-based, or actually would good old face-to-face be the best solution here? So I think we have to stay grounded with, you know, what will make that difference, and making sure that we prioritise along that way, but equally making sure that Salford keeps pace, and not only keeps pace, but continues to, as much as possible, try to lead the way. So what are the emerging things, and what I'm very interested in is the invisible world of digital. So the things that just happen and you don't even realise they're happening, but they automatically make your life easier. So, you know, whether we're seeing some of it now, aren't we, with the kind of the way that the retail industry is going, and you know, the shops, some people like that, some people don't, but you know, ultimately I think that's the kind of the space that we're trying to get to, is let's make sure that the things that will make our lives easier, we will do. It's the quicker, easier, better, to be honest, on the next level, so that you know, we can free people up to kind of do the things that they want to do. And it's that same argument really of making sure that we address the challenges in the city, so that where people still need that face-to-face support, that we're able to do that. So yeah, I think it's about marking that future for us along that sort of trajectory at the moment. But equally, I think for me, it's also about making sure that we listen hard to, you know, what the expectation is of UK PLC. So what is it that's going to make a difference, and making sure that Salford is very much in the forefront of that activity as well.
No, definitely. I mean, I think, as we've just identified, we're there, aren't we? So it's making sure that we are continuing to connect with our assets, connect our different pieces together, listen to our people, look at what's on the horizon, and be innovative and tackling those challenges as they come.
Yeah,
definitely. Steve, for yourself, and I was saving this question, and Debbie actually touched upon it before, because I'm interested in your perspective on this. When we go through transformation, there's always this debate that goes back and forth around technology being enabler, or is technology the change in itself? What do you think? Your thoughts on that?
The enabler, absolutely. And it's something, both Debbie and I, when we started this, we sat down and we didn't want it to be a traditional ICT-led programme. And my best friend probably in the organisation is a lady called Sam Betts, who's the Assistant Director of HR and OD. Because it is about organisational development and change. As I said previously, technology will come. We will plug in the right technology, it will advance, it will become consumable day in, day out. But there's an onus on us as an organisation, any organisation that you work for, to look after your staff and make sure you bring them along with the change. So without a doubt, enabler.
Yeah. Excellent. I wanted to see if that would be controversial there. Sorry, Debbie.
No, well, I was going to say the other thing that we were very wary not to do as well was to just take a process and digitise it. So is the process effective in the first place? Because if it's a poor process, then it's going to be a poor digital process.
Correct.
So it took longer, but we did an awful lot of, and through that squad working that Steve described earlier, of that process re-engineering. So what is it that we're actually trying to do? Let's streamline, let's take out so that when you get the product at the end of it, it's a completely reconstructed product that's coming out at the other end.
Yeah, and it has fixed the root cause of the issue. Because I think, and perhaps it touches a bit on what, Mo, you were saying before around having that patience, that continuous improvement, but making sure that we're not rushing it. Because I think that's sometimes the tendency, isn't it, with digital transformation, is just quickly rush and implement, and that needs to go live and whatnot. But I think, as you're saying, Debbie, it's about what is the root cause of the problem, and then how can digital help it, rather than perhaps putting a band-aid or a plaster on top of it.
We have a slogan in digital data technology, and we say, a bad service with a digital service put on top is just a digital bad service.
Absolutely.
And you can't fix things by just putting technology on them. As you say, the root cause has to be understood.
Yeah.
And you have to change the whole process end to end.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, that's a new one, seeing that digital and OD or HR being best mates, but I think that's a good piece of advice for anyone watching at the moment. So I think we're almost out of time, but before we close, I'd like to ask all of our panelists one final question, a bit of a rapid fire going around. What is that one bit of advice that you'd want other leaders who are attempting to implement digital transformation in their organizations to know? And actually, before I pass it over, I think, Debbie, you mentioned something before, that digital leaders is about creating a conversation that everyone can be a part of, even if you're a micro business, a multinational, a public sector organization, an individual, you can be a part of that conversation. So thinking about that advice, that being applicable to as many, what might that one piece be? So I'll start with yourself, Mo.
I think that's a big question. We might be on to another panel here. I think we all have to be mission led, and be focused on the outcomes and impact. I think today's leader, colleagues have talked about, the enabler. Enabler means there's got to be an impact, and we must be able to show that impact, and we must be there focused on results and outcomes, because investment, and we talk about, and I just want to touch on one point, as a viewer from outside, and we're working in partnership with Salford City Council, and I've worked across many other local authority partnerships, and collaboration is at the heart of what we do at Infor and what we're doing with Salford City Council. But I do think that Salford and the council themselves have something very magical about what they've created and the investment that's gone in, which has been over a period of time. That magic needs to be shared. And there is need in the country at this moment in time for local authorities to assume that leadership on a peer-to-peer basis, because there are so many regions who are looking to embark on the journey that Salford has already made in difficult times with courageous leadership. And that really puts Salford in that very unique situation of having made those investments and probably got the scars to prove it, that the others could learn from. And that is for us a privilege to be working with such a dynamic, ambitious local authority, city region, with the leadership committed to these outcomes. That's when the magic really happens. And I think sometimes it's hidden under a bushel. We're too modest for our own good. I'm never modest about these things. Everybody knows that. But I think sometimes it does need that recognition, and it needs people to understand what's been created and achieved here so that it can be shared. And I think if we can share it, and we can share that with other local authority regions who are embarking on that same journey, we're going to be making a difference together much quicker, and that impact will be happening.
So share with others, learn from others, celebrate your successes as you go through. Debbie, how about yourself?
I guess a couple of things really. So I think it's that clarity first of all of the vision. So you know what is it that you're setting out to do rather than just embarking on. As I say, you're in the danger of just because you can doesn't mean you should. So making sure that you're really clear about what it is you're setting out to do. And I guess for me the biggest lesson, you know, learned for us and I guess one of the key foundations to our success has absolutely been co-production. So involve people, talk to people, understand their fears, understand their hopes, and make sure that you keep them close to you at every step of that journey really, and that's really paid dividends for us in our work. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's often those things actually that sometimes get deprioritized, that engaging with people, that's sharing, but actually what you're saying is that needs to be prioritized actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Steve, how about yourself?
Yeah, very similar. So last bit of advice from me will be, and it'll probably sound very strange, is this is about people, not technology. 100%. And don't get lost in that technological world of apps and DevOps and data and ethics. Actually, this is about people, people's lives and the way that we change them and our responsibilities and dealing with the actual power that technology gives you for good. So yeah, it is absolutely 100%. If I could give any advice, it's about people, not technology. This.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots to think about there. So thank you again to our panel for being here today and for your thoughts and your views on everything to do with what's happened in the past in Salford, where we're going in the future, and what role leadership plays within that. So to our audience, please make sure that you take a look at all the other events that are taking place across this week. There's lots of exciting things being hosted by Salford and wider as well. You can take a look at on the Digital Leaders website, also on the Salford City Council website. So thank you again.
Thank you, Bella.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bella.
Thanks, Bella.